On paper, the signing of Dusan Vlahovic from Juventus on a potential free is a no-brainer, right? Well, today we're going to watch him play, and the deeper you dig into Vlahovic, the clearer it might become. This man might actually be a Rasmus Højlund clone. But saying that, I asked you guys, and most of you were all in on the transfer. So today we're going to break it all down. Every stat, every shot, every pass from the games that I have watched, and by the end of this video, hopefully, you'll be able to help me know whether or not Dusan Vlahovic is worthy of a free transfer or not. Because when it comes to trying to decide if a player is worth it or not, I like to watch about 4 games. But I can't lie, with Vlahovic, I made my choice after just 3. So, for context, the games in question were the Supercoppa Italia versus AC Milan, the Champions League versus Manchester City, and the second leg of the Nations League qualifier versus Austria. But let's kick things off with a few of the stats. Starting with the fact that he's bagged 22 goals and assists in 44 games last season for Juventus, which sounds great. Basically, a goal involvement every other game. However, if we look into his time in the Serie A, there begins to be a little bit of a worry. 10 goals with an expected goals of 12.50, meaning that he underperformed. Plus, 4 of his 10 were penalties, which he will not be taking in any way, shape or form for us. Furthermore, he had a non-penalty XG of 9.34, which is a severe underperformance. Overall, he's just not clinical, and that is reflected in this data. 89th percentile for shots total, but 21st for goals per shot, 21st for goals per shot on target, and the worst 17th percentile for non-penalty goals expected. If we take a look at this shot map, he takes a lot of shots in good areas. He also takes them quickly with an average of just 2.2 seconds per shot, but they just don't go in, with just 10 goals from 77 shots and a 13% conversion rate. And so, let's take a look at some clips. Here, he manages to get past his man, but he just can't quite make contact with the ball. Again, he does well in my opinion to speed up and get past his man, and this time does make a connection with the ball, albeit, as the data suggests, off target, and ultimately a wasted chance. Now, it's not an easy chance by any means, but as I said, it just reinforces the data. Now, that was it for the game versus Milan. As for City, we start off with him using his body well, in my opinion. He pushes off from his centre-back, in turn creating space between them. However, he's offside and also results in a pretty poor shot. The offside, by the way, is a whole other problem, but we'll get onto that later. Now here, he actually gets a goal. It's a strong header, straight at the keeper, but still manages to go in with a bit of luck. And I feel like you could say that about Vlahovic altogether. There is always a but. Nonetheless, that was also it for the City game, bringing us to a change of scenery with international football against Austria. Here we see him pick up the ball and get a long shot off, albeit off target. I actually think it's an okay effort though, to be fair. Decent power, one of those awkward bounces before the goalkeeper. It could have been dangerous if it was on target. Now he does later go on to score a goal. It's another header, albeit an open goal, but it was also ruled out for offside. However, he then does go on to score again, this time one that sticks with a pretty good finish on the counter-attack. And so ultimately, I sit here and think, well, I've just sat and watched him play 3 games. 3 games in which he scored 2 goals, plus another with a very close offside goal. So what is the issue here? Well, it is literally everything else about his game. And so let's move on to some of his passing, because what can he offer us there, right? Well, this is where I start to get some Vietnam-esque Højlund flashbacks, because the poor conversion rate is by far the least of my worries when it comes to Dusan Vlahovic. As when it comes onto his passing data, you just have to have a look at it and think, what do you do? There is very little happening here. For example, if Højlund did this, I would commit war crimes. Here's another one just 1 minute later where he has the ball under zero pressure in a great position, but produces a simply horrendous pass that kills any momentum of the good chance. But then, another minute later, there's this flick on which I actually think is really dangerous and subtle, where on any other day, perhaps it could result in something. It's unfortunately followed up though later with another wayward pass. Now here, it looks like a poor pass, but I actually think it's partially, if not more so, on Koopmeiners for halting his run. Now moving on to the City game, he loses his duel, something we're definitely going to touch on soon, but still manages to get a pass off. Here he also gets another pass off, but I think he takes far too many touches in doing so, and because of it, is slow to get the pass off. Here, despite being offside, I'm pretty sure, Vlahovic gets a nice Trivela through ball off, but follows it off with a terrible cross that is looping way too far away from the corridor of uncertainty, but it's followed up a minute later with this nice little pass. This one I have pretty much no words for. I don't even know if this was an attempted pass. If so, I don't know who to. And then here, although it doesn't result in a counter, I at least see the vision, okay? I get the idea. Unfortunately though, when we move on to the Austria game, it doesn't start well. A switch of play straight out for a throw-in. And so it makes sense that he followed it up with the basics of a quick and easy pass and move. But then he tries something more fancy again, and it's not a good idea. And so it's back to your simple after that, but albeit this time it's a progressive pass at least. But then here's again where Vlahovic excels really. Through balls on the counter-attack. Same again here. Despite the trampoline touch, he gets a nice through ball off. And so looking at his passing data, you can begin to make a little bit more sense of it. There's a lot of switches, but they're a bit hit and miss. Lots of through balls, which for the most part were good. And lastly, crosses, which less said the better. Summed up with these two. This one on the free kick is again curling way too far away from the goal to create any real sense of danger. And then this one just bobbles into the box. But possibly for me, the most frustrating parts about Dusan Vlahovic are these next points. That being the lack of offside discipline that he has, the fact that he sneaks a trampoline under his kit every game, the fact that he's more or less literally useless as a defensive output. I mean, if you have a look at his FB ref again, you can see in possession for touches, for take-ons attempted, for successful take-ons, for carries, for progressive carry distances, miscontrols, dispossessions. He is terrible. And then you look at him defensively and you just think, wow, he really is invisible. Now, I don't think Juventus are very good in the forward press anyway, but I can see why when you've got Dusan Vlahovic there. Because here he is quite literally passed through as if he is non-existent. This is a traffic cone of a footballer defensively. And I mean, you can tell by the data that there is no tracking back here whatsoever. I mean, his tackles in the attacking third, whilst far from anything special, look incredible compared to his tackles in the defensive and middle third. They are abysmal. Overall, there were honestly quite a few times I couldn't help but laugh, unfortunately, and this is where he reminds me the most of Mr. Rasmus Højlund. I saw genuinely so many similarities here. Starting with his aerial duels, because despite his size and power, he's not great at them. That's because, like Højlund, my guy seems to just be focused on having a wrestling match with the centre-back instead. What's more is that he's really poor at actually receiving the ball with his back to goal with the infamous trampoline touch of doom. Let's take a little look at some of the clips and you can see for yourself. Here, he receives a throw-in and loses possession immediately. Here, this is so Højlund. You can see him look at his centre-back whilst the ball is coming and go straight for the elbow and get in a tussle and ultimately lose the ball. Here, again, he fails to control the ball, but maybe I can be a bit lenient, I suppose, here and say that it was a poor pass. Now, here is an example of actually using his body well to protect the ball, but then it gets really bad. Here, there is quite literally a trampoline under his shirt. You cannot tell me differently. Here, again, it's a Højlund impression of wrestle first, football second. This touch right here is just kind of comical. By no means is Vlahovic slow, because despite his build, he actually has a pretty powerful stride on him, but ain't no way he was going to be catching up to that touch. And then this one we already spoke about earlier. It's pretty funny. I don't know where he was chesting this to. I don't know who the recipient of the ball was meant to be, but it definitely wasn't the cameraman. But by the way, possibly the worst part is that those last 4 touches, if you didn't notice already, were all in the same game and were all his genuine last 4 actions of that game, all in the space of around, I think, 15 minutes or so. But luckily, he actually manages to get rid of that trampoline here and control the ball. But then we come to him versus Austria, and again, the trampoline is back. Then we see him back to wrestling and losing possession, then the trampoline again, followed then again by 2 failed aerial duels. Here he attempts a skill move, but again his touch takes the ball away and results in a loss of possession. From there he loses the ball again and then gives away a foul. To nobody's surprise, then we get another miscontrol of the ball. Thus, I think you can already tell that this guy's biggest weakness is the fact that he simply cannot control the ball and likes to sometimes get too physical with his defender because of it, just like Højlund. What's more is that he gave a few little fouls away for silly things, and honestly, perhaps the most frustrating part I felt was his tendency to drift offside and take so long to get back on. With this one here, I think, being the worst example. I honestly have no idea where he is running here. He can see that he is the only forward pass available. He can see that he is miles offside, and yet he just keeps running. Thus, I would, honest to God, rather keep Højlund. Because whilst I think he is terrible, I see so many similarities between the two that I don't feel comfortable coming to terms with the fact that we'd be paying a lot for someone who would just end up probably being a clone. And I know that there's reports that Juventus will pay off his contract and let him leave for free, but even if you do get him to get a pay cut, he is currently on between 300 and 400,000 euros a week. And so I don't think you get him to agree to anything less than 200,000. And that's completely disregarding the simply stupid sign-on fee that he would want for being a free agent. Overall, you would be approaching nearly £100 million on two bums that you will then struggle to sell. One is enough, I don't want another. And yet, I say all of this, but I've watched him score twice in 3 games with another ruled out. This is what I mean. There is always a but. And so, I'm confused. We say we want more goals, and here is a striker I've watched score goals, and yet I'm still here saying I'd rather keep Højlund. What is the right thing to do here? Please, help me. Let me know in the comment section down below. Am I being too harsh on Vlahovic? Is he the man, or is he a bum? If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, ding that notification bell, and whilst you're here, you may as well check this video out on your screen right now.